Hello and welcome to North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. My name is Serge. Joining me today, we got a Nelly.
I'm here.
We got a Wheeler. And on tech, we got a Paul.
Hello.
A reminder that everything we do is brought to you by you with your support of the Patreon over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. Welcome to part 3 of our Modern Horizons 3 set review. Today we're going to be covering the gold and green cards. I probably should have said it in Wooburg order, but I got there. G and G. A reminder that our set reviews are not exhaustive. We do not talk about, every single card in the set, just the ones that we think are relevant or the ones we think you'll want us to talk about. And for what cards make a splash as well, we are covering the Commander product. Now, from the previous episode, we saw some comments, and there is one card that we think we missed, and I'm going to throw to Wheeler to cover it right now.
Pinnacle Monk. 3 red for a 2/2 Djinn Monk with prowess that says, when Pinnacle Monk enters the battlefield, you return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. And it is also a land that either comes into play tapped or can come into play untapped if you pay 3 life that taps for a red. This is one of the cycle of the monocolored modal double face cards. This one's a bit more expensive on the front, whereas the other cards are typically cheaper and also things that you don't want to include a slot in your deck for, but provide some added utility, like you like having them. But Pinnacle Monk is an Archaeomancer, which means that it happens to be a land that can also just combo with Ephemerate and Time Walk. And that's kind of hot. Speaking of hot, there are hot Bant versions of Seeker Walk. Seeker Walk being the Spellseeker Time Walk Ephemerate kind of combo that takes advantage of all those cards and also takes advantage of red because you get Imperial Recruiter, you get Minsk and Boo, Timeless Heroes, you get some other juice. But it's just really nice for decks like that are also incredibly mana hungry to be able to have a tutorable land, a redundant copy of like Eternal Witness or Timeless Witness, one that also just doesn't sap green mana if you need to cast it, which can be a little interesting for like your mana development in that deck. It's a land, so its cost of inclusion super low, but it does something very precise that just happens to slide into like I'm going to say top tier, but people might be like, it's so bad right now. Like a tier 1.5 deck in our format.
Cool.
Yeah.
I played Anarchist back when the format was a baby, and like it's so wild that like I was stoked to play Anarchist and like whatever Ghostly Flicker was around at the time, but this card I'm just like, yeah, man, I'm probably not going to play it. I don't know, maybe there's a home for it, but it's just like so much better than Anarchist.
We've come a long way.
We've come so far together, baby. All right, let's move into green.
Job.
Your job.
My job. Let's move on to green.
All right, let's move on to green.
All right, Nelson.
Paul, you want to say it too? It's Basking Brood Scale. 1 and a green for a 2/2 Eldrazi Lizard with Devoid, and 1 and a green for Adapt 1, meaning you put 1+1/+1 counter when you pay that mana, as long as there aren't any +1/+1 counters on it yet. But whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on Basking Brood Scale, you may create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifice this to add a Wingding. This is a 2/2 that makes a spawn, and for 2 mana, and maybe there's some interaction that someone cares about.
Oh, there are tons of combos with
You
this
can,
card.
yeah.
Combos.
If you're putting +1/+1 counters on this repeatedly, it doesn't say once per turn. You can generate infinite mana.
All right. What are your pieces? I'm not a counters player yet. I want to next year. I'm going to tackle that.
Rosy Cotton is a big one.
Okay. So the creature comes into the battlefield, triggers Rosy Cotton, then targets this. Then the creature comes in the battlefield. So we're making infinite spawns.
Rosy Cotton is if you make a token.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
3 mana 1/1. When it ETBs, you make a food, and then whenever you create a token, you put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control other than Rosy.
Yeah, so
right.
+1/+1 makes a thing.
Great.
Yeah, this is a synergy card that also turns into a combo piece in certain decks.
It's Scurry Oak.
Yeah, it's very
That's
similar
what
to
it is.
Scurry.
Yeah.
Brood Scale, new Basking Brood Scale, Scurry Oak. Okay, thanks, team.
There is
I did not immediately spot that.
There's another one that combos with this. There's a couple, actually, because the token you make can immediately put itself into the graveyard.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm going to pull Sadistic Glee because it's the only one that I can remember right now, which is just a 1-mana aura enchant creature, does the thing. But also Blade of the Blood Chief, a 1-mana equipment.
Or the Tarian Soul Cleaver, probably too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, the soul.
Or that was his non-token, maybe. Sorry.
Yeah, I know the Blade is the one people are talking about. Blade of the Blood Chief, 1-mana artifact that's an equipment, pay 1 equip. Whenever a creature dies, while this is equipped to whenever a creature dies, you put a 1/1 counter on the equipped creature, and if it's equipped to a vampire, you put 2. Obviously, the vampire thing doesn't really matter, but make a spawn or a scion, sack it, this gets a counter, then you make another one, and you can find this off of Urza's Saga, and also just Stoneforge, which happens to be a white creature that can pop into that kind of deck anyways.
So the Brood Scale is interesting because obviously it synergizes great with a combo deck, but it also fits into sort of these weird food combo decks that we're looking at already. Like it just fits so elegantly in a bunch of decks that are already doing the sort of stuff that it wants to.
I mean, honestly, maybe even a counters deck could get away with this. Like,
Just
whenever
as a mid-range
your
card?
yeah, it's like whenever your deck has any number of triggered abilities, create a bunch of blockers or other cheap creatures that you can then start loading up. So you're not, it gives the eggs in one basket deck a bunch of baskets that also you don't like. They just provide mana for all your other activated abilities, which then put more eggs in those baskets. So it just kind of all works together. It's a cool card.
It's a very interesting card.
Awesome.
Yeah, not often we talk this much about a common.
Yeah.
All right, next up, we've got the Birthing Ritual. This is a 2-mana enchantment for 1 and a green. At the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature, look at the top 7 cards of your library. Then you may sacrifice a creature. If you do, you may put a creature card with mana value X or less from amongst those cards onto the battlefield, where X is 1 plus the sacrificed creature's mana value. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. The obvious comparison to this is Birthing Pod, a card that allows you to tutor through your entire deck and count up the mana chain. This is not Birthing Pod, though. The reason Birthing Pod is an entire archetype is the ability to be able to do it at will, to be able to do it multiple times within your turn, and the ability to search your entire deck for exactly the right card, often not just for mid-range, but for a combo purpose, to do something very busted. That being said, Birthing Ritual is neat. I think it's very cool. The fact that it's a May, that you get to look and see if you have a hit before you sacrifice the creature and commit to it, gives you a little bit of flexibility, but I don't know how often I want to commit an entire card for the chance to maybe be able to upgrade a creature. What are you looking at?
You're like, this is neat, and I'm like, oh, and then you're like, this is cool, and I'm like, oh.
You don't
getting hit with arrows.
Yeah, I don't like it.
Serge
I think it's
thinks
fun, but I'm not going to play it.
Serge thinks it's unplayable garbage.
What do you think?
What do you think, Wheeler?
Well, I think that it's kind of powerful. It's a 2-mana enchantment.
Yeah.
It
You're
is.
high on this card.
Well, I don't think this is Birthing Pod.
That's what I said.
Yes, but I don't think this is also comparable to Birthing Pod.
Well, that's the comparison that people are going to make.
Yeah, because humans are creatures of pattern, and also that's how they get you to spend money on this card.
Sure.
Tell-
Okay.
Tell me more about this new birthing pod.
I mean, I think this is closer to something. I mean, it's not quite survival of the fittest, obviously, but this is just kind of closer to like giving your creatures pseudo cascade, or like what's the evolutionary leap, which is not a card that we play in our format, but is undeniably a powerful ability, right? Like playing a utility creature and then cashing in that utility creature for, well, ideally another utility creature is pretty neat. And again, 2 mana every every one of your end steps is pretty slick. Like that is something that you can just like cash in, like even cashing in a dork reliably into a different dork or into a 2-drop is just like totally reasonable play pattern. And the 7 cards, this card may actually get compared to Collective Company a bit more,
Sure.
which is terrible. Collective Company is a terrible Magic card in 100-card singleton.
Yep.
But this one, like when you build your deck to include a bunch of creatures and looking at 7 and being okay. Like, you make the upfront mana investment and then you get to repeatedly kind of churn. I don't know. I'm not saying that this card is going to be a breakout archetype kind of card, but in the aforementioned Seeker Walk, like, I could see maybe this seeing some play there, or in a low curve Abzan Recurring Nightmare kind of deck too.
I mean, you mentioned the Recurring Nightmare. I'm like, maybe for that, but also, I don't know. Missing feels so bad in this format.
What if you're like
Well, just don't miss.
Spencer 3 or 4 color, like you have 4 or 5 different creature combos.
Cut a color, cut Spencer, then I like the idea.
I'm thinking about this card and the fact that you mentioned like your upfront mana investment and then there's no more, which is Birthing Pod does not say that. Like, you have turns in the Birthing Pod combo. I know I'm making a comparison again that we don't want to make, but like, it's worth noting that even spending a bunch of life, you have to put a lot of mana, real mana, into Birthing Pod. And this is just like, you're just going to sneak this in on the turn where you went like Dork, and then the next turn you're just playing another Dork, and this.
But like Birthing Pod, they're normally dead after that.
I want to say it reminds me a little bit, and this is going to be another stretch, possibly not a bigger stretch than Birthing Pod, though, as a comparison. It reminds me a bit of Sylvan Library.
I was actually thinking of Sylvan Library
Because you're just like, hey, every turn, I'm going to look at a shit ton of cards.
We don't swear on this podcast, Nelson, but you're right.
A bus ton, if you will. An entire bus load of cards. And, hey, if there's a move that this card lets me make that I like, I'll make it. And if not, I'll just toss those cards on the bottom. I don't know. It's neat.
If anything, this conversation has proven that Magic players need to just stop constantly comparing cards to other cards, unless it's like Lightning Strike to Searing Spear.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's like trying to evaluate this card in a vacuum if Birthing Pod had never been printed.
If this card was called Spawning Ritual, do you think you'd compare it to Birthing Pod?
Yep.
Sacrifice a creature and make it one higher than that? Yeah.
Yeah, if it said X or less, where X is 1+.
Yeah, that's the part.
Still
I mean,
would.
I think about that with the Eldritch Evolution as well. You're like, it's kind of like a one-time Birthing Pod.
Right.
I think of Eldritch Evolution more as a natural order than anything.
All right.
Interesting.
Fair.
Interesting.
All right. Shall we move on, Wheeler?
Sure, why not? We've got Bridgeworks Battle. 2 and a green for an no, it's a sorcery, I believe. We are currently waiting to get Bridgeworks Battle up on the
I
screen.
think it's a sorcery.
Hold.
There we go. It's a sorcery. 2 and a green for a sorcery. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. It fights up to one target creature you don't control. That's bad. But wait, it's a land. It's an untapped green land. Tangle Span Bridge Works. This is one of the modal double face lands, but for green. And like at the beginning of the episode when I talked about Pinnacle Monk, it is cheaper and provides an added utility that you want in your decks, but you never really want to dedicate too many card slots to that. And it just so happens to be an untapped green land, which is probably the best kind of color that you could hope for, other than maybe red. Like, yeah, if I take 3 to play a Mana Dork on turn 1, who cares? I'm taking 3 to play a Mana Dork on turn 1, so I can play a 3-drop the next turn. Drawing this late and then +2/+2 being big enough to, well, make those Mana Dorks into actual threats that can punch. Yeah, that seems great. This seems like a totally reasonable, powerful bread and butter card that I imagine will show up in Green X mid-range decks.
Do you remember when they give us 1 mana, you can punch a creature or a planeswalker? It was like
Hard-hitting question.
Hard-hitting question.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the podcast I said, like, this has got to be the best Prey Upon we've ever seen, and I still don't think we're going to play it.
Mm-hmm.
But they might have printed a Prey Upon we're going to keep playing.
Well,
Like, this might be the best Prey Upon ever.
they did also improve hard-hitting question in this set that we're not talking about.
Lol.
Because it's just technically, functionally the exact same card, but you gain life if you have an Eldrazi or
okay.
whatever.
Yeah.
I also didn't even notice that one. Fair
Yeah.
enough.
Shall we move on, Nelly?
Let's talk about another modal double face card. It's Disciple of Frailes. 3 green for a 3/3 elf druid that says, when this enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, you gain X life and draw X cards where X is that creature's power. You've heard of this card before. It used to be a card called Disciple of Bolas and cost 4 mana, but that didn't have a backside. Well, I mean, maybe. We're looking at the face of the art. Anyways, on the back of this card, you get Garden of Frailes, a land that taps for a green and enters tapped unless you pay 3 life. So this one's kind of cool and exciting. I saw someone tweet Disciple of Freyalise with the other one of these modal dual face cards that's a big creature, and then just you play them both as lands and then cast Ghostly Flicker, which is kind of hilarious. So like being aware that like there are ways to trick these. You can blink the lands and get them to come back as creatures and then use their ETB abilities in this case. That might be relevant.
It's kind of hot. Yeah.
It's pretty slim, obviously, in terms of like brewing, but like it's also kind of hot. It's good to know that it exists.
I mean, you say that, but also one of these is a creature that's an Archaeomancer, so you can return your Ghostly Flicker to your hand.
Yeah.
You can and you will.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a little bit of like not a whole new archetype, but new design space a little bit with these cards. So that's exciting. But Disciple of Bolas was like a playable card in Standard. It's a cool effect to be able to gain life and draw cards. Hey, who doesn't like gaining life and drawing cards, right? 6 mana is a ton to pay for a 3/3, but like we've said several times, it's just a land.
It's just a land.
It's just a land. So yeah, anytime that you think you would even be remotely interested in casting this, I don't know, probably looking at you, Hoof. It is an elf.
It's got elf and druid, two creature types that historically have access to a lot of mana.
You have a lot of mana, and you are kind of often desperate to draw a bunch of cards all at once. So, maybe you have that weird turn where you're like, I can prime time, but then I can't win. But I could prime time and then the same turn draw 6 cards.
It being a 6-drop is genuinely kind of relevant because it gives you another 6 that you can Eldritch Evolution into Craterhoof Behemoth.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, good point.
It's very funny.
Oh, I love this deck. Now we're just doing the Eldritch Evo after the Ghostly Flicker.
Also, importantly, you can Fierce Empath for a land, which is honestly pretty hot.
That
I
is super
don't know
hot.
if we've talked about enough specifically those interactions with these modal face double cards on how many tutors are now land tutors.
I have mentioned it every single time.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but again, just to really stress that point,
Yeah.
like Imperial Recruiter being able to hit the 2-drop creatures to hit that. Enlightened Tutor being able to hit the aura ones and turning into a land or something like that.
Damage Call.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
choices,
It just gives you so many more lines and options when you're playing. It's like the weird tithe for a planes that you cycle and turns into a card draw.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
what?
That's something that as we get more cards like this, I mean, hopefully we don't get that many more cards like this, but as we get more cards that all kind of make this interconnected web, it's really going to push the decision making of the format, which is great.
Yeah.
Before we get to the next card, and not to make a targeted attack at Serge, but I want you to look me in the eye as I say something. Ella Domri. Ella Domri.
I mean, I was comfortable with that part. The second one's a hard one.
Filming yesterday, you called Ella Domri Eladmri, Eladramri. You called it 5 different things, and I didn't mention it at all. I just looked at the camera and Ben laughed.
Elder Murktide.
Ella Domri.
Yes.
All right. Next up, we've got Ella Domri, unpronounceable.
Corvectol.
You just say all the letters in the second one. Same as the first one.
Eladamri Corvectol
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
is a 3-mana 3/3 legendary elf warrior with a bunch of very spicy abilities. The first one, you may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may cast creature spells from the top of your library, and then activated ability, green mana and tap 2 untapped creatures you control. Reveal a card from your hand or the top of your library. If you reveal a creature card this way, put it onto the battlefield. Activate only during your turn. There's a lot of very powerful abilities here. First off, and anybody who's ever played Future Sight, that number might be getting smaller and smaller.
Oh.
Yeah, the boomers here are crying a little bit. Being able to play off the top of your library is a shockingly powerful ability. I think Courser of Crufix has probably outstayed its lifetime just because of the ability to play lands off the top. Like, people who should probably be cutting that card and are still playing it. I'm looking at myself for that. Just because of the card advantage that you can generate from that. The interesting thing about this one is it's look at the top card, not reveal. So you get all of the upside without your opponent being able to gain additional free information off of you, which is pretty cool and pretty relevant. And this second ability is a little bit more expensive, but this comes from a long line of cheat ways. I don't think you're going to necessarily be including Emrakul in there, but can you do this? It doesn't say as a sorcery, which is
During
pretty
your
cool.
turn.
It's only during your
just
You
your
can do it
turn.
during your turn, but you can muck people with during combat, certain activated abilities to bring things in, creatures with ETBs, creatures that might, function as combat tricks. This is a very powerful, very flexible spell with 2 relevant creature types, Elf and Warrior. The downsides, it's legendary, and it's a 3-mana 3/3, which is not great retail in 2024, but considering the other lines, not too bad. Play it in Elves, maybe play it in a mid-range deck if you're trying to get some advantage. Probably play it with a deck that has a little bit of top of your library manipulation. Brainstorm, for example, or some Scry stuff.
Is Cheat Platter a deck yet? Like, remember you had a deck.
I mean, I was
you had a
trying
deck
to-
10 years ago that was like all the bunch of different. cheat things.
I was an Omnitel player, a Sneak and Show player. I don't think you're playing this in it specifically because like red and blue already have you covered a little bit better. Unless you're playing specifically Eureka. But if you're playing Eureka, you probably don't need this.
I do like Jund big cheats. I think that is kind of like Sneak Attack just kills people.
I like the card Monster Manual. Like, I don't know that it's good enough to play in Canadian Highlander, but I just like the card. So I sort of like wish that it was playable.
Yeah, I had a version of Hoof that had all the Elvish Pipers.
Yeah.
And it was like super dope because it just beat it gave you so much of an advantage in the mirror.
Right.
Is like that you play the Elvish Pipers and like the Findhorn Elders and stuff. And then Ren and 6 got printed.
Yeah.
And it's like,
just
oh,
start
and
shooting all
Orcish
your
Bowmasters.
X1s and
Yeah. So like, I mean, I do like Gruul cheats, but I don't think this is not where you just play this for like elves.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
elves. Fair enough.
All right, let's move on to Wheeler.
Evolution Witness. 2 and a green for a 2/1 Elf Shaman Mutant that has Adapt 2 for 1 and a green. And whenever 1 or more 1/1 counters are put on Evolution Witness, you return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. I am a huge fan of this magic card. I like returning cards from my graveyard to my hand. I also like the decks that put 1/1 counters on creatures. I also like it when a card has, a mana sink. Like 5 mana for a 4/3 that returns a thing from your graveyard to your hand is a little expensive, but that's still 5 mana for a 4/3 that returns a thing from your graveyard to your hand. Like, that's not bad, right? Obviously, you're not able to return cheap interaction, which is where, Eternal Witness cards do kind of get a lot of their strength, is when your Eternal Witness is bringing back like a Swords to Plowshares or a Time Walk or Ephemerate. But also Witness to get back your land, Witness to get back your Planeswalker or your like powerful threat is pretty interesting for the counters decks. I don't think I'm playing this outside of the counters decks, but this card gives enough added utility to something that is primarily just beat down, makes me interested in wanting to play with this. Not to mention, much like the Basking Brood scale, but on a much worse level, this card does combo with a bunch of like 1 mana 1/1s that sack themselves
like
to
a
put
weird
down.
loop.
Yeah, Mere Scrappling's the big one.
And then all of a sudden the do
Yes.
starts playing in the background. What's that? We don't need to know what that song is called.
I wanna say on this card's behalf, like, yes, it's 5 mana, but 3 and then 2 the following turn is like a lot easier to stomach.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's not exactly, but it's similar to like a Loxodon Smiter in terms of its impact on the board. Like, this is an Eternal Witness that attacks.
Yeah, you can just play it out there and let it rock.
Yeah.
And just have this like
Just get your
activated
fetch land back.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
fine. Like, you don't
Yeah.
need to go fancy. This card's just like ready to go to town. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, moving on, Nelly.
I want to talk about Fanatic of Ronas. It's 1 and a green for a 1/4 Snake Druid with tap, add a green. And Ferocious. Tap, add 4 green. Activate only if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. And Eternalize. 2 green. Exile this card from your graveyard. Make a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie Snake Druid with no mana cost. Only as a sorcery. Okay, a lot of words for Druid of the Cowl. Druid of the Cowl, 1 green and 1 generic for a 1/3, taps add a green, and there's going to be plenty of games where you include this card in your deck where all you get is Druid of the Cowl. But lordy, that is the floor, and the ceiling is so high. You go, Mox or Dork, turn 1. This turn 2. You don't need it. Doesn't have to be a Mox, but you need to get to 5 mana, right? Because then on turn 3, if you just went Land of Elves, untap, land Fanatic Aronis, attack for 1 or whatever. Turn 3, land. Everybody but Fanatic Aronis taps to play Minsk and Boo. Make the thing a 4/4, and then tap this to cast Questing Beast. And, your opponent is dead. And, there's obviously lots of different, what the other 2 pieces are. Or, hey, maybe you're even doing it on turn 4. Even on turn 4, I mean, maybe even on turn 4 on the draw, jamming 8 or 9 mana worth of stuff is very exciting. It doesn't matter which stuff it is, really.
Question.
Yeah.
How many 2-mana mana dorks are currently seen play in the format? Because I think the time of Sylvan Caryatid is starting to pass.
It's very slow. I play Paradise Druid still sometimes.
Yeah.
I'd hard disagree with that.
Do you think Sylvan Caryatid is still okay?
Yeah, it's great. It doesn't die.
I actually
It doesn't die.
I played Sylvan Caryatid earlier this year.
Sylvan
Those two have
Caryatid,
them.
Paradise Druid, Devoted Druid.
Yeah, those 2 are both. So
Right.
the
Devoted
first 2
Druid.
protect themselves because they're
Yes.
hexproof. Devoted Druid is a combo piece.
Yes, but still a 2-mana mana dork.
Yeah.
Priest of Titania.
Right.
That's a big one.
Yep.
Outside of Hoof, maybe, because Hoof gets sort of a pass. Well, maybe
Priest
we
of
should count it.
Titania is just I think a total. If you're like a creature deck with mana dorks or whatever, like
Sure.
Seeker Walker.
It's
or
just
Pod
off in a
deck.
Soul Ring, I guess, because there's
Yeah.
me another elf somewhere.
This thing just doesn't die. It's got 4 toughness.
4 toughness is
It
huge.
blocks so well,
the
and
4
then
toughness
later
is
on,
big.
it just comes back as a 4/4
Yeah.
that taps for 4.
No, I like it a lot, but I
Yeah.
want to appease any haters who are just like, this card doesn't do enough on its own, right? Because it does have that written on it. It's like, there's going to be situations where you just get Druid of the Cowl, but I think it's worth it.
I do think this one does enough on its own.
Cool.
I mean, the floor is a mana dork that doesn't die to lightning bolt, which is honestly the description of Sylvan Caryatid
Yeah.
and Paradise Druid a
So
lot
I guess
of the time.
the question then on this is this good enough to start seeing inclusion in decks that normally wouldn't play 2 mana?
Oh yeah, I'd put what decks play mana dorks that don't play Sylvan Caryatid Paradise Druid?
I mean, most of the equipment decks that I play that have mana acceleration are not playing the 2 mana ones.
I mean, you put the sword on this thing, it's got 6 toughness.
So Food Fight, for example, is not playing 2 mana dorks, it's playing all the 1 mana dorks to accelerate.
Yeah.
And then the green based sword decks don't play the 2 mana dorks.
Yeah, a 3-color deck might not want this. But I'm going to try to word this in a way that isn't rude. Real decks that do play Gruul Monsters, right? That's the big one.
Sure.
Is that we're talking about. Gruul Monsters are Naya can absolutely play this.
I'm down to put this in 4-color initiative.
Yeah.
It doesn't fix all your problems. You're going to have some double 4s you want to cast, but you can't on turn 3 or 4 because it's 4 green.
See,
but it's going to have situations where it does too.
That's so funny because I would actually prefer the other 2 because the other 2 tap for any color, not just green. Especially if you're a 4-color deck.
Oh, you play them both.
Yeah.
Or you play them all.
All 3.
Yeah, all 3. Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't think we should ever. I think when you get good mana dorks, your question shouldn't be what am I swapping? It should be what other mana dork am I swapping for this?
Sure.
It's what clunky 3 that I'm stuck playing because I have an affinity for this garbage card should I bench so that I can start winning more games?
Hurtful. All right, let's move on to the Flare of Cultivation. 3 mana sorcery, 1 green. You may sacrifice a non-token green creature rather than pay the spell's mana cost. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, put one onto the battlefield tapped, and the other into your hand, then shuffle. So this, in theory, lets you turn any of your mana dorks into a Sakura Tribe Elder. Slightly better. I mean, it turns it into a Cultivate or something like that. So you play a creature that you don't care if it dies, and then you upgrade it. Of the entire Flare cycle, I think this one is probably the most playable. Specifically, if you're a deck that wants to accelerate and is fine basically upgrading an elf into a permanent land that doesn't die, because that's what an elf does, is it gives you mana ahead of the curve. And this does the same thing, protects it from a removal spell supposedly, and puts an extra land into your hand afterwards. Better if you can get the creature back out afterwards. I'm still pretty low on this card though.
This
I
is.
don't think it's the most playable.
No.
Yeah. I think I'm on the blue. My tune about the blue one has shifted more.
I was
Right,
thinking
like
about
the
the
blue
black one. You played the black one a bunch of the PPR.
Yeah, the black one was absurd.
So
I'm
this
just
is
like,
the final of the
black one's okay.
cycle, so we can talk about the entire cycle
Sure.
kind of
Yeah.
in conclusion right now. I don't think I'm going to play any of them. I think Black is the best, and then maybe this, and I still don't think I'd play this one.
I thought I was going to have lots of homes for the blue one, but I'm actually not sure how much I'm going to play it, but I still like it. I think I'll probably play the black one a fair bit. The red one, I don't think I'm going to play in Highlander. I want to play the red one in Commander, though.
I'm coming around on the blue one just being
Sure.
really good.
Sure.
And
Really?
yeah.
3-mana counter.
Just any deck where you have any creatures at all and would play a cancel.
Yeah, Magic players
Cancel's a good card.
feel like cancel. I don't know what it is about Magic players, but they see cancel and they're like, cancel? I would never play a cancel.
Meanwhile,
please, I'm
grabbing
above
every
that. I'm
single
above- yeah.
2-mana
Yeah.
counterspell. Yeah.
Anyways, condescend. for
Yeah.
you know. No, but like, yeah, it's the blue one is just, it's a hard counter when you need it, which honestly, we are running fewer hard counters than we have in the past.
Right.
And then it's also just another free counter, which is busted. The black one I also like, second, because I just think the decks that can play it are going to take advantage of the free cost more often.
Right.
The green one, the floor on the green one is just the best rate in that, like, yeah, it's a cultivate. The problem is nobody plays cultivate.
No one plays Cultivate, and
Nobody
they haven't
plays
for
Cultivate,
years.
no.
So that's
Yeah.
my issue with it. Like, this card to me says you would never choose to put it in your deck unless you're like 99% gonna alt cast it.
Yeah.
And now I'm trying to figure out which decks are like really stoked to get a free Cultivate by sacrificing a creature, and that's where I'm at. So
yeah.
it does seem cool. Like, mana ramp obviously is very
Yeah,
exciting.
free cultivate is kind of cracked.
Like, if you go Veteran Explorer, sacrifice it for
Yeah.
for this.
Well, that's what I was thinking, right? You know, you upgrade your wall of roots into this at some point too, right? You get a little bit of value. I mean, specifically, I think just Scapeshift as a deck that
Yeah.
really wants to get as many lands as many lands as possible into play as soon as possible.
Scapeshift also plays cards like Wall of Omens and Icefang Codal,
Yeah.
which you
Yeah.
get the draw and then you cash in.
And cards like Farce Seek that are almost Cultivate. Right?
Yeah, this card is certainly a victim of us being a 100-card singleton where we're actually trying to kill our opponents. Where Goblin Guide is a real Magic card.
Yeah, that's why I have this as my second, because I'm like, okay, the decks that need it, I think, like this better, and situationally, I don't think I'd play the other ones. And then, yeah, blue is third for me, and then I don't even remember what red and white do. They've
Red
left
copies a spell, but I've forgotten what white does too. What does white do?
Hexproof and protection.
Indestructible.
Indestructible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And your life total can't change.
that just shows where I think of that one.
I'm starting to come around on the white one too.
It's a counterspell. Sort
Yeah,
of,
I think the
right?
white one actually might just see more play than the green one. The more I'm
Interesting.
thinking about it, just because it does a thing that when you play it, you're probably winning the game.
Yeah.
And because we don't have the redundancy on cards to take advantage, like we don't get 4 Arboreal Grazers or Elvish Pioneers or even Icefang Codals, and so cashing in the green one is a little
Right.
difficult. But the floor on hard casting the green one is like, yeah, it's just going to do what this card does. And what you
Always does,
like,
yeah.
that's a
And-
reasonable rate.
And that card, so you know, like when Cultivate the card was printed, we were excited in Canadian Highlander. There were plenty of
Oh my
players
God, yeah.
that were
Yeah.
jamming Kadama's Reach, and it was like one of the best cards in their deck.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
loved the games when they got to go Elf, Untap, Kadama's Reach.
Yeah,
Then
and then
they got,
E-Witness, return your Cultivate.
yeah, that was a play pattern, right? So like when Cultivate got printed, it was like sick. We can play 2 Kadama's Reaches.
12 years later.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So.
All right, let's move on and continue the trend of Wheeler having to read the longest cards. Wheeler.
Grist, Voracious Larva. 1 green for a 1/2 legendary creature, insect with Death Touch. Whenever Grist or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it entered from your graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, you may pay green. If you do, exile Grist, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. And it comes back as Grist the Plague Swarm, a 3 loyalty Golgari Planeswalker with +1. Create a 1/1 black and green insect token, then mill 2 cards. Put a Death Touch counter on the token if a black card was milled this way. -2, naturalize. -6, for each creature card in your graveyard, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 1/1 black and green insect. I don't mind talking about another long planeswalker because 1, Grist is my favorite planeswalker behind Tameo, and 2, this is a great dredge card.
Yeah.
Like I'm just going to play auto include in dredge.
Yep.
If we can go back to the front side, Paul, very quickly. 1-mana 1/2 Death Touch is so annoying. Like it's just if I cast this card and you're on like a beatdown deck, like you're either losing a creature or you're losing a burn spell. And I think I'm okay with either because I'm a dredge deck and I want you to kill my crap. It can cast Hogak, which is pretty important. So it has a green pip for Hogak. It's a little awkward that you have to pay a green when this comes into play. But again, the ways that this comes into play from your graveyard are going to be cheap in the first place. Unearth, casting it off Luris, reanimate itself, all these other little weird ditties that get it back. Emperor of Bones. Other ways worth noting that you may get it back are through temporary, like Emperor of Bones gives it finality counter might not.
Does that work? Sorry, doesn't Emperor of Bones exile and then move it from exile to the battlefield?
It puts it into play. No, you bring it from the. Oh no, it does.
Does
Doesn't
it do? Can we bring up Emperor of Bones, Paul?
No,
It's fine.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's fine.
Anyways,
Yeah.
in Dredge, you do for sure have a bunch of ways to synergize this into being a Planeswalker, and then once it's a Planeswalker, it keeps boosting your Dredge deck.
Yeah, and then
it works great with
like
Dredge.
just milling more things, making more death touch
That's
creatures,
true.
making things that cast Hogak, being able to blow up just enchantments is a nice and artifacts is a nice thing to have. And then this ultimate, if you're playing Dredge, just wins the game.
Yep.
Like you'll just bring back your Lotleth Giant or bring back making a 1/1
The Whole
Hogak.
Giant doesn't even care that it's a 1/1. That's
Yeah,
very
it doesn't
funny.
matter because you're not exiling the graveyard.
Yeah.
You're just making copies.
The
for
fact that
things
it
in play.
doesn't exile is wild.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
But it's all tokens. Recurring Nightmare deck. My
So-
Abzan Recurring Nightmare deck wants this as well.
So this one is a bit more narrow in where it shows up. Like it's comparable to Ral in like where it's actually going to find a home, but it's very good in that home. And that deck was fine. Like Dredge is a fine deck. It can take down tournaments and has gotten a huge amount of tools that are all 1 or 2 mana in the past like 6 months. Like Insidious Roots is absurd for this kind of card or for that deck. And this card similarly kind of slots in there.
Cool.
I could see it maybe in Black Mold too. You got to like play the version with a lot of recurring idiots.
Yeah, you got to have your reanimates and whatnot.
Well, even your like grave crawlers and stuff too, right?
Yeah.
Because it triggers off of
Some
other
those.
creatures
You play
coming back. too.
Bloodghast. You play Bloodghast in Black Mold still,
So
right?
the only issue with it in Black Mold is the other side. I don't feel is as proactive as
Yeah.
other Grist because it doesn't clear blockers. It doesn't kill it. So like
well, it does make blockers.
it makes yeah.
Yeah, I mean
but-
it's like a
and a Death Toucher is a good attacker too,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it doesn't stick around in Black Mold. I just think it's like Black Mold's another deck that has the ability to take advantage of it.
So just like wants a higher against the cost rated creatures. Fair.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Nelly.
It's time to talk about Lionubra. Green for an enchantment aura. Enchant modified creature. So that means you can only cast this targeting a creature that's already equipped or attached with an aura you control or has counters. Like +1/+1 counters, shield counters, etc. Enchanted creature gets +3/+3 and has vigilance and reach, and it has Umbra armor, which, as a reminder, is just the new words for totem armor, which means the next time the creature would be destroyed, instead remove the damage from it and destroy this aura. And if you have multiple Umbra armors, you just pick one. So 2 mana for +3/+3 in exactly Bogles. Great.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
Bogles players are stoked.
Or Sarah Stankum with Stankum Stompy.
Sankum
That's-
Stompy, yeah. You obviously need a critical number of ways to modify your creature, but honestly, probably it's going to be auras. I don't know that a tokens deck, or a counters deck is going to play this. I don't like that choice personally, so don't do that. Or do and beat me and laugh in my face about it. But yeah,
No?
do play it in auras.
You nailed that? Oh, sorry.
Well, I want to be clear with the like. You don't actually need a ton of them because
Right.
this is like a bit of an homage to Daybreak Coronet,
Yes.
which specifically says that you can only enchant a creature that has another enchantment on it.
Mm-hmm.
So the play pattern of destroy your Rancor attached to your creature, then the Daybreak Coronet falls off. The enchant modified creature is fulfilled by being enchanted by Lion Umbra. Except for on cast.
On cast, yeah.
So,
So
once
that's
this
great.
hits, it's like you're golden.
You're safe.
Yeah.
So that's lovely. Improvement from Daybreak Coronet. It also costs better mana.
So
Yeah.
the next card is actually in the same conversation here. So we'll move on to Nyxborn Hydra. So this is part of the Bestow deck, which we've seen a lot of these cards already in the white set review, and we'll probably see a couple more in green. So Nyxborn Hydra is an X and a green for an enchantment creature Hydra 0/1. It bestows for X green green. So Bestow says if you cast this card for its bestow cost, it's an aura spell with enchant creature. It becomes a creature again if it's not attached. Has reach and trample, and then it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, or if it's an aura, enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each counter on it and gains reach and trample. So much like Nelson just said, this goes in exactly the Boggles or the Sarah Stankton deck. It's very cool. I actually love how much support this archetype has received, like the Line Umbra and all the other Bestow cards. I don't think there's too much more to talk about this one specifically.
I like it in counters.
Do you?
Yeah, that's a deck that can struggle. It makes really big creatures, but can struggle finding ways of pushing that damage outside of like Shadow Spear or whatever. And just being a big mana sink if you need a creature with counters or a way to put counters on things, or just paying green and giving a thing trample is kind of nice. And again, if you pump a bunch of mana into this again and go eggs all in one basket, that already makes it a pretty big target for just getting rid of it. But then you have a leftover threat.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The counters being on it, and then when the creature dies.
Pretty important.
Yeah.
Pretty important.
People do just like still undervalue reach, I think, 30 years later too. Like just 3 mana, make a 2/3 reach. Like even in a game of Canadian Highlander, sometimes that's just like, okay, the game's turned a corner now, and like you're not getting killed by these spirit tokens anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your Lingering Souls will not kill me, and I
Yeah.
can trade with your Vendilion Clique.
Yeah, like it is like fine to just play a giant spider sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, that's the Nelson story.
That's right. Cover of my tell-all.
Autobiography.
Exactly.
All right, Wheeler, you're up.
I have yet another Goyf. It is Polygoyf from the Commander Precons. 2 and a green for a star +1 star with trample and Myriad. Myriad does not do anything in 1v1. So this is 3 mana for a Tarmogoyf with trample. And I think I'm okay with that. Like, Tarmogoyf is a big idiot. It gets a lot of benefits from being a 4/5, like 2 mana 4/5. But a 3 mana 4/5 with trample is kind of interesting, or just like late game being massive. I don't think this card fills into all the same roles as Tarmogoyf, where Tarmogoyf is like secretly a blue, black, and red card instead of just being green. This one feels more like a green black card or a red green card. Like, you're not playing this with blue is I guess what I'm trying to say. But if you're a deck with mana acceleration, getting this out early, it can be a gigantic trampling idiot. And I think that's worth talking about, because like that just wins games. Like, we get caught up on fancier cards, but like, I don't know.
Sometimes you need a role player.
3 mana 5/6 trample is honestly just going to win more games than a lot of the cards that we have talked about
Yeah.
over the set review.
Like,
Yeah.
do you see this as kind of peers with, Giant from First Eldraine? Like, that was another.
Oh, the Yorvo?
Green. Like, do you see? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like, could you see it in mono green Stompy? I guess like getting the Goyf to 4/5 like often does require a second color.
Yeah, mono green Stompy are like medium green, where you like have a bunch of artifacts and smaller things that you might want to use. I kind of want to play this in like the Rock maybe too,
Okay.
because it's going to get big. If you're casting Thoughtseize and have Urza Saga, it's going to get gigantic. And for what it's worth, like if you're playing Jund or Gruul and you have Pyrogoyf in your deck, this card does have additional value with that card.
It's so funny. The 4 Goyf or whatever now.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to run every Goyf I can find.
Yeah.
That Goyf Commander deck is like, it's just loaded full of juice for Canadian Highlander.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Nelly, you're up.
I'd like to tell you about Primal Prayers. 2 green for an enchantment. When Primal Prayers enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy counters. You may cast creature spells with mana value 3 or less by paying energy rather than paying their mana costs. Now that's 1 energy. Sorry, it's paying exactly 1 energy. If you cast a spell this way, you may cast it as though it had flash. So this is an homage to Allurin, which gives you basically 2 hits of Allurin before you get to.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you can tamp the Allurin bomb.
2 hits from Allurin. I'm chilling on the couch
chilling.
with Cavern Harpy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm out. I don't. Next thing I knew, it was 7 a.m. But you're gonna need to find some more energy if you want your Allurin to keep going. We're used to only seeing Allurin when it's going infinite in our format. Like I haven't seen Allurin in Canadian Highlander except for a few handful of times. It's a bit of a challenge. Whereas like in Legacy, this has been and continues to be like an important piece of the metagame. You know, it's been various tiers, won various tournaments over the years. I don't know how good Allurin is right now, but Allurin has mattered in 60 card several times. In our format, Allurin is playable, but it's a bit of a challenge. This card, you probably want to include. Actually, I'm just going to leave it. I have no plans to play this card.
So I'm a bit of a hater.
Okay,
I mean, I think Allurin's pretty bad.
sure. It's certainly a challenge.
Yeah, this at least is not symmetrical, and you're going to run out of energy. But there might be a justification in that, like some of the Allurin kill conditions, like a Sararak goes infinite with Allurin, which is nice. Like they've really streamlined how they kill. It's worth mentioning that like the new energy mana dork, Guide of Souls, is one of the ways that you just go infinite with this, because it says on ETB you gain a life and get an energy. So if you have any creature that ETBs and returns itself with the Guide of Souls, then you can gain infinite life or get infinite ETBs from the other card. And kind of that's just how Allurin is killing. If it's not killing with a Sararak, like it's really difficult setting up the like recruiter, find this thing, play this thing, bounce recruiter, you know, like setting up those big chains. Or doing, like you could do Cavern Harpy Uro loops or whatever, but I don't, like, I'm a hater. I want to be clear. But if you're going to do this, we have the cards to do it in a deck that is packed full of creature tutors.
Right.
Sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe going for the energy Allurin Primal Prayers route is worth including in your, I don't know.
Your Allurin deck.
Yeah,
like just,
no, I want to say like your multi-creature combo deck, but I don't have an archetype name for that. It's like creature platter, right? You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
where there's several A's that connect to several different B's.
Garbage cornucopia.
It's got to be some garbage like troop or something. It's got to like denote that it's like about the people, right? It's about the creatures. Your garbage workers
Garbage buffet. I
union
don't
meeting.
know. Yeah.
Garbage buffet.
Garbage buffet, sure. Anyways,
Moving on. The next card we have is 6, which is odd because this would imply that the tree was named 6 before Ren found it or whatever, because I thought the trees died when Ren moved on.
which one of us is the Vorthos on this podcast again?
If a tree has no name, what do you call it on a Magic card?
I know you could just be like that tree before Ren knew it, right? But anyway, but I digress. So 6 is a 3-mana 2/4 legendary tree folk for 2 and a green, has reach, and whenever 6 attacks, mill 3 cards. You may put a land card from amongst them into your hand. As long as it's your turn, non-land permanent cards you have in your graveyard have retrace, which means you may cast a permanent card from your graveyard by discarding a land card in addition to paying its other costs. Now, notably different from Lurrus, you can do this multiple times per turn. The only limitation here is the number of lands in your hand and your mana. There's no other restriction other than it being your turn. You can, if you have some sort of way to loop with this, this is a very interesting, very powerful engine card.
It's a 2/4 reach for 3.
Yeah, I don't have an immediate home for this. I love everything that it does in that it fills your graveyard itself. It puts lands. You may put a land card from amongst them into your hand. It puts lands back into your hand, and that fuels the retrace. So it's not a lands card.
What?
You think it's a lands card? It puts a land in your hand and it fills your graveyard, and you discard to it. Well, I think so. Like I think of this closer to like a Seismic Swan sort of thing, where lands are the engine piece and the fuel, but it's not a lands deck, and that it's not using lands to kill you. Like this is a graveyard matter synergy card. You probably play it with like Life from the Loam and other things that work with it, but I don't call this a lands card.
Well, the lands decks don't always use lands to kill you. They use lands to invalidate what you're doing. And this can draw you lands.
Yeah.
And get your engine going, which is pretty important. But also it can just let you recast your destroyed Zurin Orb or Fast Bond or
Ren 6.
Ren 6. Yeah, I think I think this card's pretty great. I've come around on this card. It attacks nicely, draws you cards, fuels your graveyard, which is nothing in that kind of deck because, you're probably playing like Savine's Wreck and Reanimate and stuff and like an Abzan Lands mid-range deck too.
Remind me, there was a 4-mana 3/3. I think it was called Sovereign Turtle.
Blossoming Turtle.
Blossoming Turtle, which this is
Blossoming Tortoise.
Blossoming Tortoise. I got both of the words wrong.
We knew what you meant though.
I like this better than that. I think that was another card that did something similar because that's a 4-mana 3/3. Whenever it attacks, mill 3, then return a land card from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped.
Yeah.
And it had some other text. And I saw this, kind of liked it, have never sleeved it outside of Commander.
Sure.
Yeah, 3 mana is less than 4, even if like you don't get the land into play off of 6, which can actually be beneficial, right? Like you get the Boseiju in your hand or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just think this card is not too complicated. You don't have to ask for much from this card, but then it can also just kind of pop off.
Yeah, I just like that in the early game it blocks like a machine, and then in the late game just like lets you recast your relevant stuff.
I think it should be clear that I'm not dissing this card or anything like that. I see it as a lands. It's so weird. I have to put it in different little categories.
Your vision of lands involves Dark Depths more than your average lands player.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is probably fair. All right, you want to move on?
Sure.
Wheeler.
Sowing Mycospawn, 3 and a green for a 3/3 Eldrazi Fungus with Devoid, and Kicker for 1 and a colorless. When you cast this spell, search your library for a land and put it into play. When you cast this spell, if it was kicked, exile target land. So this is a callback to Reap and Sow, 4 mana sorcery that has Entwine that either finds a land, puts it into play, or destroys a land. The thing with Reap and Sow is that it needs to resolve. This does not need to resolve. You just pay 4 mana, cast this, cast trigger, find your untapped Tolarian Academy, find your untapped Gaia's Cradle, find your untapped Urza Saga or Caracas or Inventor's Fair or whatever the hell you want.
Dark Depths.
Sure.
This is a lands card.
I mean, it's not bad. Like for that.
Yeah.
I might kick this card once every 200 games or whatever. I just care about this being something that is colorless and a permanent, and that on cast trigger, I can find my Tolarian Academy. The little note I like to leave with this card is that because of Devoid, if you're an Academy deck with Mystic Forge that can cast colorless cards off the top of your deck, you can cast this off the top of your deck.
That's very funny.
Yeah. Devoid doesn't really show up except for when people are like, what do you mean I can't pitch this to Fury? But yeah, the deck that this card goes in has a very particular niche synergy that will pop up.
Sick.
Yeah.
You're up, Nelly.
Hey, I want to tell you about Springheart Nantuko, 1 and a green for a 1/1 enchantment creature insect monk with Bestow for 1 and a green. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1. And Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 and a green if Nantuko is attached to a creature you control. So you get this trigger only if Springheart Nantuko is attached.
No.
Well, I'll keep reading.
Okay.
If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature. If you didn't create a token this way, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. I've read this card before, and now that I'm reading it, I feel like I don't understand.
May I?
Yeah, please.
Great.
Whenever a land
So
enters the battlefield.
I'm breaking this down.
Yeah.
So it's a creature or you bestow. There's a landfall trigger.
Yeah.
No matter where it is, you have a landfall trigger.
Yeah.
If it is attached to them, this landfall trigger is modified so that you can pay 1 and a green.
You may pay the 1
Yes.
green.
But only if it is bestowed on a creature.
That's the if.
And when you do, you make a token that's a copy of the enchanted creature. But if you didn't pay 1 and a green, or if this is just a creature, it has landfall, make a 1/1 insect.
Okay, so I actually need like one of those flow charts
Yes.
with the bubbles and stuff, and you might too. But basically, so you know, You pay 2 mana for this, whether it's bestow or you just cast as a creature. And landfall, you're always getting another 1/1 green insect
Yes.
token at minimum.
Yes.
So everyone's clear about that. All right, so this card has like some combos. It's a landfall creature that makes creatures. So if you have a card that cares about creatures entering the battlefield, especially if that lets you go like look for a land or something, things get out of control. Also making copies of various creatures of yours if they have the ETBs that synergize, or look for your number of whatever creature type or whatever, that can also snowball. So it has both synergy potential and infinite combo potential.
Yeah.
It slices. It dices.
It's a pretty cool card.
This card would be less confusing if it said landfall, make a 1/1 insect, unless it's enchanted. If that's the case, you can pay 2 to make a copy instead.
Yeah.
Like,
I like that one better.
I'm sure the templating has to be very precise for a reason.
Yes.
I just like that the bestow is the same cost as the other one, because oftentimes bestow is significantly more expensive.
Yeah.
And so it's supposed to be sort of a like, well, if you draw it early, it's A, but if you draw it late, it's B. And instead, this gives you a wild amount of flexibility early on.
I mean, 2 mana 1/1 landfall make a token is kind of wild.
Yes.
Like, turn 2, play this off of a dork into fetch land.
Yeah.
Is kind of crack. And
Yeah.
like,
You can just put it on your dork to protect it too. Like the big thing about bestow with that landfall trigger is it takes your opponent 2 removal spells unless they have a disenchant to deal with it. So
That's
there's
still 2 removal spells.
yeah.
Because then they're not killing your 1/1. Yeah, it gets through the first fury though, right? Absolutely.
So
I'm looking forward to trying this thing out.
yeah, in lands and yeah.
I don't actually know what the best home for it's going to be, but it's like pretty easy to include. So.
Well, it's a very good include in the Sanctum Stompy deck again,
Okay.
just because it's both an enchantment creature and a bestow creature, so it plays double duty off of your enchantresses, and then in landfall decks that like sort of those mid-range landfall want to be aggressive, want to get value out of it. It's great there because it's just so cheap and flexible.
Wait, what if you bestow it on a Primeval Titan?
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Gross.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. We have The Hunger Tide Rises. This is a 3-mana saga for 2 and a green. Chapters 1, 2, and 3 are all the same. Create a 1/1 black creature insect token. And chapter 4, sacrifice any number of creatures. Search your library and or graveyard for a creature card with mana value less than or equal to the number of creatures sacrificed this way and put them onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle. I actually missed this one, so I'm taking a second to parse it. 3 mana for 3 bodies is okay. It's a little bit slow. It stretches across time. The fact that it's an insect immediately makes me think of synergizing with Grist is kind of cool. I mean, the Hunger Tide is probably a reference to that name anyways. The final chapter is kind of cool, especially the ability to search both your graveyard as well for flexibility. I think it's ultimately pretty slow, though. So I'm not massively huge on playing this, but it probably got included because somebody saw a line with it looking at Wheeler.
I mean, there's no particular line. It is indeed slow, but sagas are criminally underrated, especially when they just make bodies and then tutor. Like, this card is slow, but that's okay. A lot of time, if you rush into killing people with your creature combo deck, you're just begging to get blown out. In the first place. I'm not super convinced on it, but there are people who are good at Magic the Gathering that play these kind of decks that have talked about this positively.
Sure.
In either Seeker Walk or Hoof or the Garbage Buffet.
Garbage buffet,
Garbage
whatever it is.
buffet,
Yeah,
yeah.
your many creature combos in one
Yeah.
deck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
A lot of tokens. I wouldn't play it in Aristocrats. I want to get that out of the way.
Oh, that's fair.
I feel like it's a bit too slow for... Well, actually, would I? Now that I'm saying it.
3 mana.
Yeah,
Also, isn't green one of the colors sort of least represented in the Aristocrats anyways? Probably second only to blue.
like the best version of Aristocrats is going to be a 4-color list without blue, and the green is pretty solid. There are a lot of good green.
There's just the double body ones, right?
Yeah, it's typically the double bodies or like Grist and like
Right.
Young Wolf
That's fair.
and other combo enablers. Tutors are good.
All right, take us home. Last green card, Wheeler.
Okay, Thief of Existence. 1 colorless and a green for a 3/4 Eldrazi with Devoid. And when you cast this spell, exile up to 1 target non-creature, non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value 4 or less. If you do, Thief of Existence gains when this creature leaves the battlefield, target opponent draws a card. So this really has Ancient Tomb mana. Thank you. Being able to exile Minsk and Boo, every initiative creature basically, Comet, Teferi 3, Oko, Grist, any of these cards
Jitte.
that are uncounterable. Like it's like on a cast trigger is wild. Being able to get rid of Dark Depths is wild, like a Merit Lodge token.
One ring?
Getting rid, yeah.
That's huge.
Exile the One Ring.
One ring?
One ring.
Yeah, yeah.
Or
This
Expo Masters
like,
too. Yeah.
This mana cost is a little awkward,
Yep.
but this card is kind of cracked. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of these cards that we mentioned, they're powerful enough that your opponent has probably gotten some kind of value out of them, but you just have to accept that that's a fact of, like, you know, modern cards. But you can't really complain if you cast this and it gets rid of their Fable the Mirror Breaker or Crucible of Worlds or whatever. Like, it's just, yeah, to hell with those cards.
Right.
And like those cards are at their best with like Force of Will backup, right? Like that's when they feel incredibly busted.
Even just getting their mana rock, like this is a pretty early play. Costs the same mana as Stone Rain.
Yeah, there are decks that just will struggle to get rid of a 4 toughness creature as well.
Yeah.
Like especially decks that have important permanents, like mana rocks, right? Academy decks are not exactly excited to have to try and like. They don't, like, you draw a card, but who cares? You exiled my thing permanently as a cast trigger. Time Vault's another one, right? Being able to get,
Sure.
I mean, if you're smart, you're not playing out your Time Vault, but, certain circumstances might lead that.
You might play one ring though, or not ring, one keys because it untaps a Soul Ring or something, or some kind of thing.
The
So you have
keys.
to play it out. So then you lose one of your keys. You have to go get
Yeah.
the other one. That can happen even if you're.
Yeah, finding a spot's the hardest part,
well.
but there are plenty of Ancient Tombs running around. Like mono green Gruul monsters, like a top tier deck can play this.
Oh my
So
God.
that's pretty good. Pretty good.
But wait, that was just the green cards. Welcome to gold, starting with Cranial Ram. I actually skipped you, Nelly, but that's all right. I want to talk about this one
Do
because
it,
it's a
do
me card. Red and a black gets you an artifact equipment living weapon, so it enters play with a germ token on it. Equipped creature gets +X/+1, where X is the number of artifacts you control and equips for 2. This is a throwback to Cranial Plating, which is an amazing finisher in the artifact deck that hits for 1 million. Now, one thing that this is missing compared to Cranial Rating is the ability to move it around at instant speed, but it comes with a germ. I like this in the artifact beatdown decks. It's not tremendously flexible outside of that, but that's okay.
Black's a bit tough, but it's gotten more cards, and this is honestly one where you are going to play. Like if I'm like a Jeskai artifact deck that is playing Cranial Plating, I'm going to be playing Mox Opal. I'll play Spire of Industry and Glimmer Void and stuff. Like I may even just splash an Underground Sea to cast, like to get redundancy of one of the best cards in your deck. Well, the best like aggressive cards in the deck. Yeah.
So let's go to Nelly, and then we'll go to Wheeler, and then we'll reset after that. So Nelly, you're up.
Let's talk also about Cursed Wombat, black and a green for a 2/3 Nightmare Wombat with 2 black green, so 4 mana, adapt 2, and permanents you control have whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on this permanent, put an additional +1/+1 counter on it. This ability triggers only once each turn. Okay, so we've got a 2/3 for 2 mana in black and green that is like a slam dunk in counters.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know how much more we need to say.
Yeah, it's like
That's
a lightning
it.
That's the
constrictor.
card.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a good card in counters, played in counters.
It is worth mentioning there's a bit of a delicate balance in playing too many cards that have counters and too many cards that care about doing counters
Yeah.
things. This one just lets you do
Does
both,
both,
which is enough to make me ignore the only once each turn.
Right.
Like that's nobody likes seeing that line of text.
Sure.
But that gives it enough flexibility for that.
All right, Wheeler.
Faithful Watchdog, green and a white for a 0/0 dog with vigilance, and Faithful Watchdog enters the battlefield with 3 1/1 counters on it. So this is going in green-white watchdogs.
Yep.
Green-white little kids / green-white idiots. I would play this in every counters deck as well.
Yep.
It's great. It's a very beautiful dog. Some of my favorite art in the set. Good.
It's so good.
Good boy.
Maximum good boy.
It's so. I can't believe they made Watchdog. They made a better Watch Wolf twice.
Yeah.
Like they're just like counters and
A keyword
vigilance.
ability. Yeah. God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, now we're back to Nelly.
Okay, I want to tell you about Imskir Iron Eater. 6 black-red for a 5/5 legendary demon with affinity for artifacts. That's right, regular affinity. You might only cast this for 2 mana. Wow. It isn't an artifact itself, though, just to be clear. And when Imskir Iron Eater enters the battlefield, you draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is half the number of artifacts you control, rounded down. And 3 in a red, sacrifice an artifact. Imskir deals damage equal to the sacrificed artifact's mana value to any target. Okay, so a bunch of things going on here. Little homage to Bosch, maybe in the lore. This character is related to Bosch. I don't know. And the ETB, big sign in blood, basically. You lose some life and you draw some cards.
Sign in
Yeah,
blood.
it's half the number of artifacts you control. So obviously you're putting it in like an artifact-based deck. We talked about Jeskai Splashing before. I don't know where to put this. I don't play decks like this usually, and this card particularly I think has a hard time finding a home in those decks because it is a finisher that is not itself an artifact. But you're going to want to put it in a deck with a ton of artifacts and has an easy time casting black-red.
I don't know. All right, Wheeler.
I would try this in Grixis Welder. I was initially a hater,
I'm a hater.
and
I'm not
I still think I'm a bit of a hater,
Okay.
but I'm less. I mean, I'm enough of a Magic player that tries to win a bunch of games that I will try this card out, because if I'm like Grixis Welder is a deck that plays a bunch of terrible artifacts,
Yeah.
like that just cash in themselves and tends to like to be incredibly grindy. And this is a card that is incredibly grindy. I don't think you play this in an artifact deck that is looking to kill your opponent quickly.
Sure.
But like, I'm fine casting 5 mana for this card in like the Grixis Welter if I have to. Ideally, I'd prefer to cast 2.
I'm on team this is not playable, specifically because there are, in any of the synergy and any of the density decks, there's only so many slots you can play that are non-artifacts, and I can see this getting cut so quickly.
So that's where the Welder decks are interesting, because they are not under those restrictions as much. They are definitely in the group of like, wow, Tolarian Academy taps for 2 mana.
That's great.
That's kinda wild.
enough, right?
Yeah, like you'll play your powerful cards. Like you use your artifacts to filter through your deck, and because there are a lot of cards that care about recurring those and whatnot, you just play this card because you're Seed to the Sidon now to add 2 mana for it, right? And that it can end games and just draw you some cards, and like it's a big body that replaces itself, which I think is good enough. Like if this card draws me 2 cards, I'm okay with that.
Let me talk about this theoretical shell of Grixis Welder with this Bosch ability too. Like you've got your Thought Scour 7-drop
The Thought Monitor.
Monitor.
and it counts the mana value. So for 4 mana, like,
Yeah.
are you excited to fling that? Like, this isn't an ability that has been kind of available. Like, you don't want to play Bosch, obviously.
They have this on one commander card as well, the 3 mana 2/2 that has attacks with menace, whatever, the Cannoneer Bombardier.
Oh, Broadside
Bombardiers?
Broadside
Yeah.
Bombardiers? Right, okay. So
I mean,
that,
you don't have to pay mana for it, but the idea of like
Right.
you cash in these artifacts and you like throw them at them is like
Right.
kind of interesting.
you're right. We have seen this
Yep.
trigger once before on one of the most menacing cards
Yeah,
in the format right now.
Bombardiers
That's
is
right.
kind of messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like it's obviously a strong ability and it's 4 mana, but like it will come up. It will be relevant.
The
Right.
downside is that you can't throw treasures or
Yes.
food or
like you can with
whatever.
the Bombardier.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, for sure.
You're probably playing both.
Yeah. But I'm willing to give it a shot.
All right, maybe
Okay.
maybe I have to try this.
I'm excited to see it. It does look like a fun card.
Also,
So-
it's like a promo for this set, which makes me think that, look, if you are like a promo in the set. One of the few.
You got to be
Like,
good.
yeah, it's a Modern Horizons set. Like
All
this
right.
has to be somewhat
I
better.
mean, it's cool. I'll admit that it's cool.
I do like playing Spot the Card that's better than you think it is.
Yes.
Like that's such
You
an
think it's
important
this one?
game for,
Okay.
especially for people in our position.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Next up, me. And we've got Invert Polarity. This is a 3-mana instant for blue, blue, red. Choose target spell. Then flip a coin. If you win the flip, gain control of that spell, and you may choose new targets for it. If you lose the flip, counter that spell. This is one of the coolest, if not funniest, counterspell they've ever printed. It is upside either way.
There's a lot of discourse about this card going on right now.
Okay, I'm
and about
shocked.
how it's a bit of a litmus test as well. So how do you approach this card? Do you see it as a counter spell that occasionally wins you the game on the spot, or do you see it as a card that wins you the game on the spot, or it's just cancel?
What? I think this
Interesting.
I see this as the first one. This is a counterspell that occasionally wins you the game on the spot.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm in that camp too. Like I'm playing it not as like the only counter in my deck because I just wanted to win the game on the spot, but I'll have to settle for countering. But I'm putting it into decks that like are down to play counter magic, and they rely on this one for
You
that.
might not know this, Wheeler, but some decks sometimes you just have to play cancel, and
Yeah, no, I
Interesting
I
question.
like this card.
I didn't think that was what the litmus test was.
I
gonna
read
be.
this as, so there's a chance that I'm going to win the game,
yeah,
or I'm going to not lose the game,
yeah.
which is what you, or like, that's why you play
Isn't
counter.
this just like a glass half empty, half full thing? You're like,
Yeah.
is this a
Yeah.
counterspell with upside?
Yeah.
Or upside with a counterspell?
Well, a lot of the discourse surrounding this card was like, why on earth would I ever play 3 mana for a counterspell?
because you can occasionally win the game.
Yeah, because you just win the game. I mean, and when I say win the game, people might be like, how does this actually win the game? It's
You
like,
get their primeval titan.
yeah, like if you're getting anything that's 3 or more mana, that's huge.
You get their Minskin Boo. You get their One Ring. If it's uncounterable, you can't do it. But you know what I mean? Like what?
Well, yeah.
Wait, if you can still gain control
gain control.
of the One Ring, right? Yeah, or the uncounterable spells. That
Right, because it doesn't
then
even
the counter
counter.
side.
You just gain control.
Yeah, you just
of
gain
it.
control of it.
I mean, if you target an uncounterable spell, then you can't lose the flip.
And
Right.
like even if they're like Thoughtseize you, and you're like, nope, or
Thoughtseize
duress
you, yeah.
like you get to 2 for 1 them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've become very high on
I
this.
think this card's actually, it's weird. It's kind of similar to the blue flare, where you're like bottom situation is you canceled it.
Yeah.
You had to pay for cancel, and you got cancel.
I can't believe this set makes me so excited to play Blue Moon. Out
Yeah.
of like all the decks.
It's
Yeah.
the cards that Blue Moon gets out of this set are really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Winning a new moon, like
Yeah.
that's messed up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Wheeler, you're up.
Kudo, King of Bears. Green and white for 2/2 legendary bear. Other creatures have base power and toughness 2/2 and are bears in addition to their other types.
It's a hate bear.
I like a good hate bear. I think this is a mid hate bear. It's nice that it can turn your mana dorks into reasonable threats. It is symmetrical, which can get their big things into smaller things. But green, white, and especially the white part of that, like doesn't care. Like that's white's whole color identity.
Right.
Is that I don't care if you have a 5/5. My 1 mana spell is going to deal with it. You might get something for it, life or a basic land or 2 map tokens or whatever, but all my removal does not care what you're playing. So it's a little awkward. And I don't know if a green-white hate bears deck is in the like room to
Market?
play
Yeah.
awkward cards.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't need to.
I look at this card and I think it's like a pretty, I want to say mid hate bear. No, you say it's like not an attractive enough like detriment to your opponent. The times when it's going to turn Merit Lage into a 2020 are adorable.
Yeah.
Like I can't wait to bird dog some game where someone slams Kudo in response to their opponent putting down like a 10-10 whatever or activating Dark Depths. The thing I realized preparing for this episode, I actually did think about this card a bunch. I don't know what the cheapest way to make a bunch of O1s is. Like, is it still just an Awakening Zone? Because King Among Bears as like a weird combo enabler anthem could maybe be fun. Like I just realized this is like not a thing that I think a lot of other like it's sort of a token strategy, I guess, but it just seems a bit
It's a very weird anthem.
It just seems like a more effective, juicier, intangible virtue in the right circumstances. So, I don't know. Hit me up.
It makes like
Tag me if you make a list with Kudo that pumps all your little tiny things.
I was gonna say to that end, it does make stuff like Faithful Watchdog a 5/5.
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
you can potentially,
Counters.
you can
Yeah.
potentially in a way like hose your opponent and build around it. But again, that's very niche because it's a 100-card singleton.
Yeah.
Make your
So-
Hydras even bigger. Yeah.
No,
don't
I
know.
think we're all on team. It's as a hate bear, it's pretty mid for our format.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right,
You know what's not mid?
you got it.
Nadu, Winged Wisdom. 1 green blue already. The Simic linings getting you tingling for a 3/4 legendary bird wizard. This card's got everything already. I don't even have to read the text box, right?
Done.
Wrong. Flying. And creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. This ability triggers only twice each turn.
Oh no!
Only twice. Only twice. So
Each individual creature.
yeah, for
Yeah.
every creature that you have, as long as you control Nadu and Nadu doesn't get hit with frog fire or whatever it is, or path,
Frog fire.
I just want to say, like, maybe it'll lose its abilities.
Yeah,
and then
okay,
you
yeah.
stop having abilities. But yeah, this card has been very much talked about by people who play other formats. Notably, the combos really well with Shuko, just like Cephalid Breakfast creatures did. You're going to get, more lands than you need, and every one of your creatures is going to draw you 2 cards if you have a free way to target them. And you can keep going from there if you want. You can add more pieces to the combo to then draw your whole deck or get other triggers happening, but you don't really need that. It's a 3/4 flying for 3 with, along. If anything targets it, now you're drawing cards and getting lands on the battlefield. So that's enough. If you don't mind that it's legendary, and you're playing blue and green, and you have room to target creatures with your own stuff, play this.
The floors, it's a nightmare off of Noble Hierarchy. What the hell?
Yeah.
I like your inclusion of the Shaku there. I think that's
Yeah,
extra
Shuko.
spicy,
Yeah, Shuko is a good one, but any equipment will do.
Yep.
Anything that targets your stuff to fight their stuff, or just pump your own stuff.
You tried to kill my Nadu. I'll draw a card.
Yeah.
I'm going to activate Mother of Ruins.
Yeah.
I'll draw a
Draw
card.
Yeah.
2 off that.
Yeah.
I mean, you put
Mom's
this
good call.
in a bug deck too with what's the black, green, blue 3/3 legend, whatever.
Leovold.
Yeah, Leovold and stuff like that too. Just the legends in the deck are such a nightmare.
Yeah.
Shall we move
Terrifying creature. Watch out.
on? Yeah. Speaking of terrifying creatures, next up we have Flage, Titan of Fire's Fury. Pardon me. 3 mana 6/6 legendary Elder Giant for 1, a red and a white. This is a continuation of the Giant Saga from Eldraine?
Theros.
From Theros, pardon me. And I believe lore-wise, there's still one more Titan that they have mentioned that we haven't seen yet.
Okay.
I think that's correct.
Is that, yeah, there's Uro, there's the Kroxa,
Kroxa.
Yeah.
Flage, and then the unnamed 4th one that we haven't
Another
seen
one.
yet. Or the named 4th one that we haven't seen yet. Anyways, Flage, when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless it escaped. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, it deals 3 damage to any target and you gain 3 life. And escapes for red, white, exile 5 other cards from your graveyard. This card's fantastic. It lightning helixes, it comes into play extremely cheap, and just kills anything when it lands and gives you some life, which is very cool. And does a very good job of being basically the coolest Inferno Titan you've seen whenever it attacks.
It's a really good mono blue Titan.
You like this in Jeskai?
Yeah, I'm going to try it in Jeskai.
Yeah.
I
just
like
this in
lightning
red, white.
helixes. Yeah. Red white's a little awkward when it comes to filling the graveyard.
The escape portion for sure.
Yeah, cantrips and hand attack are the way, and burn spells are the way that you get these cards into the graveyard.
Yeah.
Some kind of combination
Sure.
of all of those, I think.
I think this has enough value that you're fine just playing it for 3 and then waiting a beat or 2. But yeah.
Yeah.
Any game where all it does is Lightning Helix has got to feel kind of funny, but I suppose you sort of beat Lightning Helix on the cost of inclusion because it's flexible. I'm not I don't know. I'm just not that excited about this one, but I am going to play it.
I'm going to Caracas my own Flage.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
You just played over and
yeah.
over, right?
No, I get it.
How does a creature deck beat my like Jeskai? I mean, how does a creature deck beat Jeskai?
Period.
But
Yeah,
like, you know, just Flage Caracas.
Sure.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
if
put a
that's your
creature,
turn, play
Helix
mana.
it, bring
Helix
it back.
Factory.
Oh, it's so funny.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right, next up,
Straightforward
Wheeler.
card.
Yeah. Planar Genesis. Green and a blue for an instant. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped. If you don't, put a card from among them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is 2 mana, Impulse, or look at the top 4, pick a land, put it into play tapped. Great. It kind of fills a similar-ish kind of space as something like Growth Spiral, which I do feel is a little underplayed in our format. Growth Spiral is a pretty good Magic card. Like it just replaces itself
I just
in
played it in
ramps.
Scapeshift,
Yeah.
yeah.
I like this
I
in
like it.
Scapeshift quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
I don't know where else this card shows up. Like I tend to, I mean, you could maybe include this kind of card in Jeskai Green, honestly.
What about Storm? Like, are you still playing any Anticipate? Like, they're playing like Shimmer of Possibility, right?
Green is a bit
That's the hard
tough.
color, yeah.
I mean, there are
But it's
certain
an instant too, so I don't know.
Yeah, there are certain Storm builds that do play green for like Veil Summer, City of Solitude kind of cards. So
Yeah.
maybe you could justify playing this, where because sometimes you need the card, sometimes you just need mana. It's a very good card. Like the card quality of this is pretty great.
Looking 4 deep for 2 mana is kind of a big deal.
I'm looking forward to Chris Sutherland casting this against me on my end step. Like this is big, like Sutherland vibes
Yeah.
out of this
Hell
card.
yeah.
Yeah, there is a Bant control deck that I have actually played and updated recently, where it plays Fair Scapeshift for Field of the Dead,
Sure.
and that deck rules. Like I when I played it on stream, it was just like I went X and 1 over the day or whatever, and this is like the perfect card to slot into there.
Right.
Yeah.
Nelly.
I want to tell you about Psychic Frog. Oh,
Oh, little guy.
getting all the hits tonight. Okay, blue-black for a 1/2 frog. Whenever Psychic Frog deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, draw a card. Discard a card. Put a +1/+1 counter on Psychic Frog. And exile 3 cards from your graveyard. Psychic Frog gains flying until end of turn. And I want to read the flavor text. Some frogs poison the body. Some frogs poison the mind. Very elegant. Call back to Psychotog here.
It's like if you say it really fast, it kind of sounds
yeah.
like it too.
And incredibly, like, both of the big hits from tell me what the setting was. Invasion in
Odyssey.
Odyssey, blue, black, and 1. You know, John Finkel was granted his invitational winner player card in Shadow Mage Infiltrator, and did a bang up job giving us a 3-mana 1/3 fear that draws cards when it hits your opponent. Unfortunately, printed right next to the uncommon Psychotog, which would end up being the much more important creature in pretty much all the formats where they're both legal. But this card gives you both. It doesn't have fear, but you can exile cards from your graveyard to get flying. First Psychotog also let you exile the cards from your graveyard to give a +1/+1 until end of turn. But this one lets you discard the cards from hand to give a +1/+1 counter. Okay, I'm done comparing it to Psychotog and Shadow Mage Infiltrator now, I promise. This awesome 2-drop can get in with evasion, make itself bigger, and draw you more cards, even if it's attacking a planeswalker. My only problem is I don't know actually where to play it. Grixis Crimes? Grixis 2-for-1s, maybe? Can have it?
Grixis Bug, Esper,
Yeah.
Blue Black. I just kind of want to play this Magic card.
Yeah.
Same. Yeah,
Yeah.
Those, like, I'm like being pulled into whatever archetype this little guy's in.
I mean, granted, I am a man that recently purchased 4 copies of Odyssey Psychotog just because I saw them.
Yeah.
And I thought they were cool.
You're just like,
Like I
yeah,
saw them at
wanna put those in my
YJ, and I'm
pocket.
like, yeah, I might as well.
Why
They're
not?
just still on my desk looking at me.
Yep. Mr. Teeth.
Yeah, Dr. Teeth.
Dr. Teeth.
Dr. Teeth.
Dr. Teeth?
Dr. Teeth. I mean, it could be just a
Let us know in the comments whether you think it was Mr. Teeth or Dr.
Dr.
Teeth back
Teeth.
in 1999.
Dr. Teeth.
There's got to be a blue-black, just sort of like evasive, annoying, not quite tempo deck. I don't know if it's good, but God, the card quality that it has access to is so exciting that I always want to play it.
Yeah, the downside of that deck is that it never really had 2 drops, and now you have 2 drops.
Yeah, it really does.
And-
Ledger Shredder, this, I mean, yeah.
Mercurial Spell Dancer.
I like that I named 2 cards and I just stop.
Yeah, I mean,
Baleful Strix.
yeah, the list could
I
go
don't-
on.
I don't hate this as a 2-drop in even like Esper Initiative was looking for stuff.
Sure.
It would rather have creatures that has an ETB because you're playing like a revitalized. Nope, that's the wrong card. It's gone. You're playing a lot of 2-drops just to even your curve out and to have some kind of board presence before you start landing your initiative threats and trying to do something like this. And this does a pretty good job of gumming up the board, giving you time, generating card advantage, and being a threat. And I think about this in sort of like the bug ninjas or blue-black ninjas as well as a cheap threat that can get in with evasion and upgrade into a ninja and offer some flexibility. I don't know if it's a great home for that because you probably want to let this stay, but it's such a cool and flexible threat.
I like it in ninjas because you attack, and they're like, okay, I don't know if I'm willing to block because my blockers matter. And maybe I'll just let you have a card.
Oh, you get
instead.
the bluff, and you're like, haha.
Yeah, no, there's a bunch of room to play there.
Yeah.
I just don't know if I want to return this to play a ninja when this is just better than having ninja the deep hours in play.
Yeah, that's a problem too. Depends on the ninja. Like I think you're only
It's okay,
upgraded
though.
into like Fallen Shinobi.
Yeah, you only bounce it for Fallen Shinobi, but you know,
Card's great.
yeah.
All
That's
right.
good.
Moving on to myself, we have the Revitalizing Repast. This is a 1-mana instant for green-black hybrid. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gains indestructible until end of turn. And on the flip side, so we're finally in gold. This is a new cycle. All of the monocolors have it enters play tapped unless you play 3 life, unless you pay 3 life. These ones are always tapped, but they're dual land. So great amount of flexibility. The front side is quite powerful. We often talk about how underutilized combat tricks are in our format, and +1/+1 and indestructible may as well be blossoming defense, other than the fact that it doesn't give hexproof, so it still gets exiled, but that is a blowout of a combat trick in a lot of matchups, or it's just a land. So put it in decks that cares about counters or protecting your threats, and is a green or a black deck.
Yep.
Yep.
I think this one's my favorite because it's only 1 mana.
Oh, we'll get to my favorite, but I'll show you.
Okay.
All right, Wheeler.
Satya, Aetherflux Genius. This is a card from the Commander product. 1 blue, red, and a white for a 3/5 legendary human artificer with menace and haste. And whenever Satya attacks, you create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of up to 1 other target non-token creature you control. You get 2 energy. And at the beginning of the next end step, sacrifice that token unless you pay an amount of energy equal to its mana value. So this card, I initially was kind of like, I don't know. I don't know.
There's a lot of words on it.
Then I realized it's just good Lightning Angel,
Yeah.
which is really unfortunate to say. I mean, good Lightning Angel is just Lightning Angel. Look, you can pry that card from my cold dead hands. But
This is Lightning Angel from 2024.
in like an actual factual like Mantis Rider aggressive Jeskai kind of tempo deck, I really like this card. Obviously, it's a 4-mana legend, so you got the Caracas issue, but menace and haste on 5 toughness that play this, attack, make a copy of, I don't know, I said Mantis Rider, I'm still thinking of Mantis Rider,
Seeker of the Way.
but even making a copy of like, I don't know,
Snapcaster.
a Snapcast. I was trying to
Dragon's
avoid.
Rage
Sure, let's go with
whatever.
Channeler. Let's
Yeah,
go with
Channeler,
with
yeah,
Darcy, right? Making another 3/3 flying or 3/3 flying delirium card.
That
in
one
the
you're going
air.
to keep right away.
Yeah, making a copy of your Brazen Borrower. Like just making a copy that's tapped and attacking to add additional pressure is great. You're probably not going to get to keep it the first time around, but the second time around, if you still have this, then you're like really solidifying that you're just going to win this game. And God forbid you copy Fury or Solitude.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of, well, that's just disgusting. But it will show up. Like you'll get to like play this and just take over the game. Yeah, big fan of this card.
Sick.
Yeah.
Nelly, you're up.
Sneaky Snacker is the next card we'd like to talk about. Blue and a black for a 2/1 flying fairy. I was just
That's-
looking at it recently.
Yeah.
Sorry, Paul. I almost remembered enough. Oh my gosh, I got that much. Blue black for a 2/1 flying fairy rogue with when you draw your 3rd card in a turn, return Sneaky Snacker from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. This is a common, and that's all I got. I don't know where to put this card. Drawing 3 cards in a turn is something we do regularly in this format. So if you can loot this away, you can get it back for free and beat down. Maybe it's in Dredge.
I mean, this is great for ninjas as well, all of a sudden as well. It's just a cheap evasive threat that if it dies, that's fine. It might just come back free if you brainstorm and you're in blue.
right. Really good like ninja enabler because it's evasive. It's pretty cheap.
A lot of your ninjas also just draw cards when they hit them. So
Yeah.
draw for turn, hit them, and then cast a cantrip, and you get a new flyer that you can then bring back.
This is just a sort of like I was talking. I tried to stretch with the psychic frog, which is better than that. This is exactly what you're talking about. Of you want to smooth out the curve. It's a lot of the decks are missing good 2-drops after you go through like the 3 best ones. You're like, okay, what are my 4th or 5th 2-drop? And then now you're like, well, it's an excellent role player and
Yeah.
flies.
Psychic Frog's
evasion.
Psychic Frog's a better card, but this hits all the different notes in terms of synergy, which is pretty nice.
All right. Next up is me. And this is my favorite of the 2-color ones. We have Strength of the Harvest. On the front side, it's an enchantment aura, 2 and a green-white hybrid. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each creature and or enchantment you control. And on the back side, it's a green-white dual land. We got another copy of
Ethereal
Glimmer.
Armor.
Or Ethereal
Alright, yeah.
Armor, Glimmer. What's the rest of it?
All that
that
All the
glitters.
glitters.
Yeah, and this is just a density card in a deck that wants more density, and you have the flexibility if it's being a land. If you have a very slow open, you can play this into a 2-drop or something afterwards. I'm so happy to get this card for exactly Sanctum Stompy and or Boggles.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it seems great for Sanctum Stompy.
Yeah. So there you go. That's my winner for the favorite, but obviously very different decks. Wheeler.
Stomp. 1 and then Hybrid Gruul for a sorcery. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. And then the flip side is a tapped red-green duel called Burn Willow Clearing. Pretty straightforward. Again, it's a red-green duel that requires you to ideally have bigger creatures, but it's also a fight spell. I did that in the wrong order, but that you get. I could
Fine.
tell you every part of. I could go stump sorcery, target don't control, land green red, uncommon, and you
I'm
would be
taking
like,
notes.
you'd be like, oh yeah, I'll play this in Gruul Monsters or like mono green Stompy because it's just a land.
You can read it upside down. I still liked your version of Nantuko Springheart better.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, pretty straightforward. It's the tap duels are a little more particular where you play them.
yeah.
But for the ones that we have listed here are always going to do the thing that you set out to do, which is why there are fewer of them than the monocolored ones.
Yeah, sure.
One of the reasons.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's good.
I definitely agree. Not all the duels from this cycle are playable, unlike most of the monocolor ones.
Yes.
right?
So
Yeah.
we don't have white-black or
Or
white-blue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
those-
white black one is a 5-mana aura.
Yeah.
The blue white one is crap.
Yeah.
The blue red one makes you draw cards at or draw and discard at random.
Yeah.
The blue green one is a 7-drop Eldrazi.
Yeah.
yeah.
is, like,
It's a
honestly kinda
creature.
fine.
Yeah, I actually don't hate that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and don't worry, we'll get to blue-black. We'll
Sure.
get to that one.
Yeah.
All right, Nelly, you're
But
up.
first, let's talk
yeah.
about the Necrobloom. 1 white, black, green for a 2/7 legendary plant with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 0/1 green plant creature token. If you control 7 or more lands with different names, create a 2/2 black zombie instead. And lands in your graveyard have dredge too. So I like this in, wait for it, lands. Maybe you could also play it in a lands deck. I thought I was going to say something different, but then I didn't instead. Yeah, it lets your lands come back from the graveyard to your hand with the dredge ability, which then puts more lands in your graveyard to come back to your hand with the dredge ability.
Nice strip lock.
Yeah, and it also makes creatures that can, block so you don't die while you're doing your really slow make the game over lands
So
thing.
big.
It's also got 7 toughness. It's 4 mana, like
The
this
size of that
yeah.
booty.
4 mana in a deck with like fast bond and exploration and
Yeah.
some acceleration it
Yeah.
makes it a little easier. Also, just like it does get Caracased, but because playing your land is just taking a game action,
Yeah.
like it's not the end of the world if you're like, okay, this got Caracased, play it. I now have priority still. play my land, get a 2/2 or
Yeah,
whatever, or play my fetch land, get a 2/2, and then it's in an
go to
awkward spot
respond,
where they go to respond to do it, and you're like, well, I'll respond to that and crack, and yeah, it's just, yep.
A lot of the landfall cards that specifically are also win conditions have historically been very expensive or clunky or vulnerable. And this one being cheaper and resilient is awesome because like you used to have to do Avenger of Zendikar, which cost about 17 million mana to play. And then even then it was a little bit slow. You'd get a bunch of 0/1s, but then you'd be like, okay, I'll play a land later, and then they'll eventually get larger, and you'd be waiting and stalling for that. But this lowers the curve and increases your threat density so elegantly.
Plays defense by just being cheaper and having a big booty.
And making infinite 0/1s too,
Yeah.
right? Like as you slowly build up to 2/2s, you just have chump blockers. Don't even have to risk the threat of like this plus removal spell if you block their like something.
The top priority of a land sec is just don't die.
Yeah, it really is.
Because they'll kill you. They'll figure it out. They just got to not die before it happens.
So play this so that you die later.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Next up, we have, as we hinted, another card in the dual land cycle, the Waterlogged Teachings. This is a 4-mana instant for 3 and a blue-black hybrid. Search your library for an instant card or a card with flashback, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. The flip side is a blue-black duel. This is a reference to Mystical Teachings, which is very, very cool. It finds an instant or a card with flash, which is so live in the deck that plays these colors. And the fact that it's also land is amazing. The fact that the blue-black deck can now tutor for this with the other teachings and find a land is also kind of real.
Very cute.
I forgot to say it the last one, but my favorite little tidbit related to that is that Mystical Tutor, the original printing on Mystical Tutor, it references mana sources.
Oh, yeah.
Which, because that, for a very small window,
Sure.
mana source could relate to like ritual.
burnt offings or
Right.
something.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I have a very vivid memory of somebody who was new to Highlander or casting Mystical Tutor and trying to find a land. And I was like, that's not a mana source. Don't worry about it. But now you can do it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Now you can do it.
Go get this one with Mystical Tutor.
Or you could just kill them.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one I think is one of the most powerful ones.
Uh-huh.
However, I don't immediately know what home it goes into. My first thought was High Tide, but I'm not sure. I'm not a Mystical Teachings player.
Thorical
play it?
combo.
Yeah,
It finds
thank
Tainted
you.
Pact Demonic Consultation. It's also a black. It's funny that it's just a tap duel, but that's kind of relevant for Thorical decks that have Tainted Pact mana bases, but also have very specific like mana costs to meet.
Right.
Especially if they're on Doomsday. Like
Okay.
Doomsday, the
Yeah,
Doomsday
it needs
Thorical
all
setup.
3 black lands to get going.
And those decks also play stuff like Chrome Mox. So this being a multicolored card that is hybrid is like not nothing. This card's wild.
Thank you, Wheeler. I knew I'd be seeing more of this card, but I was curious as to where. Yeah.
No worries, Nelson. You're going to die to
Oh
it.
my god, so often.
yeah.
Yeah.
Looking forward
In
to it.
my PPR kit, I actually got a foil copy of this, and it's
nice.
one of the cards I was most stoked to
I
get.
bet it's a great foil.
It's so pretty.
Yeah.
It's so pretty because the text that shine.
Yeah.
All right, and finally, the last card of the day, Wheeler, take us home.
White of the Reliquary, black and a green for a 2/2 zombie knight with vigilance. White of the Reliquary gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. Tap, sack another creature, search your library for a land and put it into play tapped, then shuffle. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to play this in Dredge.
Yep.
It casts Hogak. It's a 2-mana 20/20. It's got vigilance. It can put my Dredge cards that I maybe had to cast into the graveyard to find Bazaar of Baghdad. Yeah, it's great. I don't think it's ubiquitous. Like, I'm not super excited to even play this in like a I'd maybe try this in like a lands mid-range deck. I definitely play
I'm
this
gonna
in
play it in lands mid-range.
I'd play this in depths in like the black green
Yep.
Golgari depths list.
Yep. So zombies.
Yeah.
Lands mid range. Dredge. Black mold.
Zombie's a hard sell.
You don't like it in zombies?
Well, it's got green.
Green.
But there's a history of good.
Yeah.
Green.
There are 2 green zombies,
You do see
basically.
Sultai sometimes in zombies, I guess, or 4-color.
As the premier zombies pilot of the format.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, it's
But yeah, it's gonna do a lot of stuff.
going to be big.
It's
For
gonna
cheap.
be big.
It's
Yeah.
going to be a 2-mana 4/4 vigilance with an onboard trick to
Yeah.
murder your opponent.
And yet, still not good enough. No, that's not true. It's fine. It's fine.
Obvious callback to Knight of the Reliquary. I'm hoping we get. Maybe I'm alone here, but I just find the art unsettling. Probably because Knight of the Reliquary is one of my favorite cards.
Yeah.
And like looking at Knight of the Reliquary kind of calms me down. And so this card, just like the story of this card and the art of this card tilts me.
Mm.
But I love the mechanics of this card.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
this card is a house.
Yeah.
So
Fair.
stoked for that.
All right, friends, that is going to do it for part 3 of our set review for Modern Horizons 3. As a reminder, if there's any cards you think we missed, let us know in the comments down below. We covered a lot, but there's also, this is a very pushed set, so see how it goes. And make sure you stick around for part 4. Our first ever 4-part, this is the longest set review we have done. I want to see all that engagement. Reminder that everything we do is brought to you by you with your support of the Patreon over at patreon.com/LoadingReadyRun. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. I have been Serge, joined by Anelli.
Hey.
We got a Wheeler.
Ah.
Shout out to Paul on tech.
Hello.
Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.